Hi, fourth graders. It's Mrs. Nash. And today, for our read aloud, we're going to be reading the story Mangrove Wilderness out of your Storytown books. If you would like to grab your Storytown book, if you have it handy there at home, that would be great. I'm going to go ahead and start my PowerPoint while you guys are grabbing your books. All right, and the story starts on page 628. Before we begin, just a few things to kind of keep in mind. If you look over here on the left-hand side of page 628, you're going to see that the genre for the story today is expository nonfiction. Now, if you remember, an expository nonfiction piece of writing is a true piece of writing. Okay, nonfiction means true, and it's expository, so it's giving us information, or it's going to give us facts on a subject based off of the title of the book, Mangrove Wilderness. Today, we're going to be learning facts and information about Mangrove Wilderness. Our comprehension strategy, our focus strategy for the week, is still going to be sequence of events. And so you're going to start to see this happens first, this happens next, then this happens. This story kind of details trees that grow in mangrove wilderness, the trees and the animals. And so it kind of talks about the life cycle of that ecosystem. And so that's what we're going to be reading about today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. A frog, a crab, a fish, and a bird. These four creatures and many more hunt, seek shelter, and raise their young in forests along the south coast of Florida. They are part of a vast web of animal life that is supported by a remarkable kind of tree, the red mangrove. It is an odd-looking tree that seems to stand on stilts and grows where few other trees can, in salt water. The stilts are actually the mangrove's roots. They are called prop roots because they help prop or support the tree against the ocean's strong waves and tides. Red mangroves grow in warm tropical regions near the Earth's equator. In Florida, they flourish along the edges of the swampy Everglades at the southern tip of the state. There, the land is broken up into thousands of small islands by inlets and waterways. The trees thrive in these inlets, or estuaries, where fresh river water leaves the land and meets the salty ocean tides. The water around the trees takes on a reddish color from the natural dye called tannin in their bark. A red mangrove tree produces about 300 seeds a year. By no means do all the seeds survive, but if the conditions are suitable, a lone red mangrove like this one will be surrounded by a forest of young trees in about 25 years. The new forest will be a nursery for all kinds of wildlife. Creatures from the tiniest worms to huge birds like pelicans will be able to find food, shelter, and safe nesting places among the mangrove's tangled roots and full branches. Life cycle of the mangrove. Bright yellow flowers are the first step in the formation of mangrove seeds. More than 1,000 flowers bloom on each mature tree in the spring. After a month, the inch-wide blossoms drop off, leaving behind rust-brown fruits the size of plums. Each fruit contains one single seed. In about 2 months, something unusual happens. The seed inside each fruit sprouts into a seedling. The root end emerges from the first fruit, followed by the stem. The seeds of most kinds of trees do not begin to sprout until they have fallen off the parent tree and landed on warm, moist earth. If the red mangrove seeds were simply to drop, the salt in the ocean water would keep them from sprouting. So the seeds take advantage of their parent tree's ability to extract nutrients and moisture from the water and soil without taking in any harmful salt. Staying attached to the parent tree, the seeds grow into 6 to 12-inch seedlings that are themselves resistant to salt. Development of mangrove seedlings. These cigar-shaped seedlings, called propagules, have a store of nutrients to keep them alive after they drop into the water. They are also buoyant and can float away out of the shade of the parent tree to areas where they will have more room and sunlight to grow. When the seedlings fall, some drop like darts, root end first into the sandy shore or the shallows. These seedlings put down roots near the parent tree. Others float in horizontal position until their root ends become waterlogged and heavy. The weight pulls the root ends down and the seedlings float with their stems upright. They may drift for thousands of miles, living up to a year before they come to shallow water. Then their roots ends bump along the water's bottom. This triggers the growth of a network of small roots that eventually catch in the soil. Scientists believe the red mangroves in Florida are the descendants of seedlings that drifted all the way from Africa. Growth of the mangrove. A couple of years ago, the tree in this photo was a 6 to 12-inch seedling. Now it is about 2 feet tall. It will continue to grow several inches a year throughout its life. The average height for a red mangrove in Florida is 30 feet, but if the conditions are good, this tree could grow to be 80 feet tall. Red mangrove trees grow best in shallow water, like that around the oyster bars off Florida's southwest coast. Oyster bars are underwater mounds made up of colonies of living oysters and the shells of their dead predecessors. The water around these bars, which is often only 1 or 2 feet deep, is ideal for red mangroves. The trees actually turn oyster bars and sandbars into islands. As debris in the roots becomes soil, land eventually forms around the trees. Red mangroves that once sprouted around old exposed coral reefs helped to create the islands we call the Florida Keys. Once the ground is built up around the red mangroves, other kinds of mangroves, black, white, and buttonwood, move in. But red mangroves are usually first and most often at the water's edge. They seem to be the most successful at growing in tidal saltwater, and their strong roots are best able to withstand storm winds and waves, preventing the land around them from being washed into the sea. However, storms with extremely high winds like hurricanes can uproot even the sturdiest red mangrove trees. Hurricane Andrew swept through southern Florida in 1992, destroying mangrove forests along 20 miles of coastline. But because the seedlings can live for a year in the water, new young trees soon sprouted where the old ones once grew. Life in the mangrove forest. The mangrove leaves floating in the picture above are an essential part of the mangrove wilderness food chain. Even before the leaves fall from the mangrove trees, they are food for airborne bacteria and fungi. These microscopic life forms are able to break down the material in the leaf called cellulose that many other creatures cannot easily digest. Once the leaves drop into the water, more bacteria and fungi attach to them, making the leaves rich in protein and good food for larger animals. Small crabs and other crustaceans gnaw at the leaves, breaking them into pepper-speck bits called detritus. Pink shrimps and many kinds of worms, mollusks, and crabs dine on the detritus. They are eaten by small fish, which are in turn eaten by larger fish. The larger fish are themselves eaten by birds, continuing the food chain. In the photograph, bottom right, hundreds of mangrove snapper and other fish hunt for smaller fish among the gray-green shadows of the mangrove roots. Orange sponges, oysters, and other filter feeders cling to the roots, trapping tiny particles of detritus as they strain water through their bodies. We humans eat oysters, fish, shrimps, and other animals from different stages of the food chain supported by the red mangrove trees. Occasionally, an alligator enters the coastal mangrove forest from its inland home in the grassy swamps of the Everglades. A young alligator will eat the many pink shrimps, small fish, and crabs in this rich marine feeding ground. But a fully grown alligator would visit the mangrove forest in search of big fish and such mammals as a raccoon. In the branches of a red mangrove tree, an Everglades rat snake is waiting silently to snatch a small rodent, bird, or tree frog. A rat snake is a constrictor. When it catches a meal, it does not eat the animal immediately, but it curls its body around the creature and squeezes until its prey is no longer moving. At low tide, a raccoon pokes its long, nimble fingers along the mangrove roots, searching for crabs. Strong, sharp teeth allow the raccoons to eat hard-shelled crabs and other shellfish. But this stealthy predator's favorite food is coon oysters, which it can find clinging in huge clusters to the sturdy mangrove roots. Early in the morning, a green-backed heron stands motionless at the water's edge. The bird has left its roots among the mangrove branches to search for fish, worms, or insects to eat. Nearby, a snowy egret stands tall, equally still, watching for fish or shrimps. Both birds will strike swiftly, grabbing their prey with dagger-like beaks. Greenback herons and snowy egrets are just two of more than 20 different kinds of birds that inhabit the red mangrove forests. On an island formed by mangroves, two brown pelicans are building their nest. The male collects leaves and sticks from neighboring mangrove trees, preserving the branches of his own. He returns to the nest high in the leafy canopy, and with clumsy flapping of his wings, he swoops to present the building material to his mate. The islands are safe nesting places, or rookeries, for birds. The surrounding often offers a measure of protection from the egg-eating raccoons and snakes. And with so many birds nesting and roosting together, one is sure to spot an enemy, such as a swimming raccoon, in time to squawk a warning to the rest. These three white ibis have just landed on the mangrove island where they spend every night. As the day ends, thousands of birds, including herons, egrets, cormorants, frigate birds, and pelicans, arrive at their own special mangrove islands. There's a lot of squawking as the birds compete for a place to perch. Some dive into the water for one last meal, then return to their branches as the light fades. Suddenly, the sun is gone. Silence follows. The birds settle down to sleep and gather strength for another busy day in the red mangrove wilderness. All right, in a little bit, I want you to go into your assignments tab on Teams, and there is a comprehension quiz that goes along with the story for today. Now, if you remember, we talked about how expository nonfiction gives us information on a topic. And we also talked about at the beginning of the story, how the story is structured at the beginning, giving the sequence of the life cycle or the ecosystem of the mangrove. And so you're going to see, as you saw in the story, it talks about how the seeds actually grow out of the mangrove. And then when they get to be 6 to 12 inches, they fall off and they float in the water, and then eventually they grow into trees. And then it also lists what kind of animals eat, find homes or eat parts of the mangrove, okay? So, as always, work really hard, 4th grade. I know you guys will do awesome, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.